Hey y'all, welcome back. Derola Nixon from Nixon Disability Law, coming to you with part 4 of our series on the relationship between Congress and veterans. This is part of our Veterans Month campaign, where we're bringing to you history and trivia and important tips to know about veterans and how they've served the community, how they've affected our country, and not just obviously protecting our freedom, but many other ways, how they've affected our country from before our foundation, in fact. Anyway. So this is part 4 of the relationship between Congress and veterans, and we left off with the comment that the U.S. Civil War changed everything. So you'll recall that I said in the last episode that circa 1835, there were about 40,000 veterans, widows, and children as beneficiaries who received federal veterans benefits. Because of the U.S. Civil War, those numbers would increase unbelievably. From 1863 to 1888, there were approximately 40,000 veterans benefits applications per year. Per year. Do the math. It's incredible. In fact, it would grow even more because in 1890, Congress passed a law that allowed for an unemployment benefit for the first time. So here's the first helpful hint. If you're a veteran and your disabilities prevent you from either getting a job or keeping a job, you need to contact a VA disability lawyer. Even if you do not meet the scheduler requirements for IU or TDIU, which stands for Total Disability Individual Unemployability. Try to say that backwards fast. Even if you don't meet the scheduler requirements, you can still be granted IU. Call an experienced VA disability attorney to help. All right, back to our information. So, in 1890, it was the first time that IU as any type of benefit was awarded as part of a VA pension. So that meant that Civil War veterans who were infirm and couldn't work anymore could actually apply and they would get a pension. Okay? Now, the number of pensions total also ballooned. In fact, from 1883 to 1893, which is a 10-year time frame, the total amount of veterans' pensions trebled to almost 1 million total per year. Now, actually almost 1 million total. As it may be obvious, we're just going to state it anyway. Not everyone who applies for a veteran's pension or a veteran's benefit would be given one, okay? But the total number of pensions trebled from 1883 to 1893, which is astounding. Just to give you perspective, guess what percentage of the entire federal budget was represented by or consisted of veterans' pensions in the 1890s. Approximately 30% of the whole federal budget did. So let's compare that to today, okay? Today, 2024, approximately 70% of the federal budget, it's mandatory outlays in which there's no kind of discretion, no choice that the agencies get to have, okay? But 11% of the federal budget represents defense discretionary spending, and 14% represents non-defense discretionary spending, which adds up to a total of approximately 25%. So think about that. A greater percentage of the entire federal budget in the 1890s went to just veterans' pensions. It's astounding, okay? And this, of course, is income tax. Income tax, there needed to be a constitutional amendment. I believe it was 1913 or 1914 when that went through. So there was no federal income tax. 30% of the federal budget was veterans' pensions, okay? It was an era when federal outlays to individual citizens were extremely rare. They were rare and they were extremely small, okay? So this was special. Now, what was the stop date on all of these Civil War pensions we've talked about? Do you guys recall? The stop date was the year 2020, because in 2020, the last recipient of a U.S. Civil War veteran's pension died. She was age 90. She was the daughter of a Union Army soldier. Now, some of you may be asking, well, okay, so there were two sides of the Civil War. It was a civil war, so they're both part of America. In fact, one of the reasons the conflict was fought was to keep 11 states part of America. Well, what about Confederate War veterans? Well, what happened with them? Next time we'll tell you. And then we'll move into the 20th century. In fact, that item takes us into the 20th century because it was a 20th century issue and not a 19th century issue. And then we get into the modern era and some exciting things. The biggest thing, of course, would be the VLJA, which I will talk about in detail in its own episode. All right, stay tuned. Thanks for being here.